Matrix Resurrections is finally here, the long-awaited sequel to one of the best science fiction movies ever made. But how was the film? Return to a world of two realities. One, everyday life. The other, what lies behind it. To find out if his reality is a construct, to truly know himself, Mr. Anderson will have to choose to follow the White Rabbit once more. I took a week off for the holidays. I didn't bring my equipment home. That's why I'm getting this review late. So I'm going to warn you now, this is going to have full of spoilers for Matrix Resurrections because the film has been out for almost a week now. So I think if you're going to see the movie, you've probably watched it by now because it's on HBO Max, but you've been warned, it is full of spoilers. If you've been following my channel, I've been reviewing the first three Matrix films the last few months. I love the original. It's one of the best science fiction films ever made, and I really still enjoy the sequels. I think they're underrated in a way. They have lots of great ideas, but they're filled with issues. But overall, I think it's a satisfying and interesting trilogy. Matrix Resurrections is finally here. It's been 18 years since Matrix Revolutions. So was the wait worth it? And I really don't know how I feel about this film. I was reading online before I got to see it. I was a little late to seeing this film, actually. I wanted to see it in theaters, but unfortunately couldn't do it. But I was a few days late watching this film for the first time, and some of my friends actually got to see it before me. And I was looking at the reactions online, and holy shit! I was expecting this to be the worst movie ever made. Like, the reactions I mean this film were insane. I try not to look at reactions before I see a film. Sometimes when you're on Twitter, it's impossible to miss some things. Some things might get spoiled for you. Fortunately, nothing got spoiled for me, but I got to see everyone's reactions, and I was very surprised. And in a way, it did lower my expectations a little bit because I really thought the trailers looked cool, and I was interested to see what they can do with this universe. And I want to say this. I don't think Matrix Resurrections is nearly as bad as people are saying. It is filled with issues. It is definitely my least favorite out of the Matrix films. But in my opinion, there are too many good ideas in Matrix Resurrections for me to absolutely hate it. I think it's filled with a lot of problems. We can talk about that now. I think how the film opens up is pretty interesting. You've learned that Neo has created this Matrix trilogy video game. This Matrix video game trilogy is the story of the original trilogy, the film. So all these events have happened and everyone's aware of it. But they think it's from a video game. They don't think it's real. I think that's interesting. And then the gaming company or whatever wants them to make Matrix 4. It's very meta what they're saying. They said something like, Warner Brothers is going to make Matrix 4 with or without us. And they started shitting on the fact that people enjoy nostalgia, people enjoy things that are familiar. So in a way, it was the Wachowskis giving a big middle finger to reboots in Hollywood that have been going on in recent years, ever since really The Force Awakens has come out. And I thought that was really funny. I thought it was interesting, and it is a valid message. But my issue with this message, even though I think they're completely right, is that it would have been interesting if this film felt completely different from what we've normally got. It is definitely the most different Matrix film we've ever had, but by the end of the film, it still just felt like a reboot of the first Matrix. So in a way, when they said that line about Warner Brothers forcing us to make Matrix 4, I wonder if Lana Wachowski really wanted to make this movie. I really have no idea. But if I had to guess, she probably did, because there are a lot of great hidden messages in Matrix Resurrections, just like in even the worst Matrix films. And I really appreciate that. How we're always on our phones, social media. Instead of going to phones, we've got to go to mirrors to get out of the Matrix. It's like a reflection on ourselves. There's a lot of hidden messages that throughout the years we're probably going to appreciate a lot more. I thought, though, after seeing this film, that I would maybe appreciate it more as days go by. But honestly, as more days go by, the less I like Matrix Resurrections. I think the most disappointing part about Matrix Resurrections is that the action here really isn't that exciting. The thing about Matrix Reloaded, and Matrix Revolutions, it had this style of action that we've never seen before, with the kung fu fighting, how they bend reality, and they do all this crazy shit. Here there are some crazy action sequences, and they do bend reality sometimes, but there's never that sequence of like kung fu fighting that felt just so much fucking fun from the original Matrix trilogy. And I'm glad everything feels a little bit different, but in that sort of way with the action, I don't know why it felt so different. It should have felt more familiar if they're going to do a reboot of this. Because that was one of the best parts about the original trilogy was the action. It was groundbreaking. Here, it just felt extremely generic. Like, there's not one memorable action sequence in this whole entire film, and that is extremely disappointing. I'll talk about the story now a little bit more, and I do appreciate that they didn't retcon the original trilogy. They build on some things from that. I really loved how in the real world they are working with the machines in a way. There are some machines that work with the humans. There are still some machines that are evil. I thought all of that was great. That was probably the best part about this film. But I don't know. I feel like out of all the Matrix films, this was probably the least interesting. I know that Revolutions has its problems with how it's structured and paced. But the overall story and concluding this overall story was still very investing. Here, I do think in Resurrections, it is structured better than Revolutions, but I just wasn't nearly as interested in the story as I was in the original 3 films. And maybe because it felt like the whole film was just a rehash of the first, where Neo's trying to learn what the Matrix is and kind of learn who he is again, kind of like the first one. And then the ending is saving Trinity, which is kind of like the ending of the first one, but they're saving Morpheus. And it just all felt the same, even though they're saying they're trying to be different. There are some different elements. It's definitely not just a copy and paste remake of the first, but it just felt too similar for them to say at the beginning of the movie, like, oh, fuck reboots, fuck remakes, but it felt like a normal reboot or remake. Morpheus is back, and he's not played by Lawrence Fishburne. I get that's part of the story, but in a way, how Morpheus is used throughout the film, I feel like you could just cut him out of the film. You don't have to have Morpheus, just introduce a new character. And then with Agent Smith, I know they wanted Hugo Weaving back, but he couldn't because of scheduling conflicts. So I don't know what you're supposed to do there, because you do have to have Agent Smith back, because they said if Neo exists, then there always has to be Agent Smith. It's like his yin to his yang. So you have to have Agent Smith back, but I don't know how they could have fixed that, because not having Hugo Weaving there was nowhere as interesting as the original films, and it really takes away from it, which makes this film feel a lot less memorable. Final Chase is fine. I thought it was interesting that when agents take over bodies, they still look the same. They don't turn into these people with like suits and ties, so sometimes you don't know who a Smith agent is. That's actually a really cool idea. And they are suicide bombing themselves out of all the buildings. Like, that was an interesting sequence. And then the sequence, Neo and Trinity are trapped on top of the building, and they jump, and then Trinity can fly, and you find out that Trinity's the one also, just like Neo, and I think that's fine. I mean, it works with the story. If you're going to bring them both back like the way they did and how things were explained, I thought that was fine. And I see people on Twitter and online are up in arms about that. I really didn't mind that at all. I thought that was an okay idea. My issue with the film is that it's just not that interesting. I don't really think it justifies its reason to exist. And like I said before, it doesn't even seem like Lana Wachowski won't even make this film. There are a lot of great ideas in Matrix Resurrections. Ideas that over time are probably going to age well, just like the sequels did. But the film ended up just feeling like a reboot and not that interesting of an action movie, which is so disappointing coming from a Matrix film. Over time, I don't know how my opinion will change on this film. As I said before, after a few days, my opinion on it has gotten worse and worse. So who knows, maybe like a week from now, I'm going to think it's the worst thing ever like everyone else. Or maybe a year from now, I'm going to think, wow, I actually really enjoy Matrix Resurrections. So I don't know. It's strange to actually see and review a Matrix film the time it is released. So who knows? There might be a lot more things in this film I'm missing. There are definitely a lot more things I'm probably missing that I might appreciate a little bit more. But for now, I didn't hate the film, but I was definitely disappointed. I'm going to give The Matrix Resurrections 5 Davy Daves. I'll say this, though. The ending here sets up a sequel, and I would love to see a sequel to Resurrections. There are some things they set up and some original ideas that I thought are pretty interesting that I'd love to see moving forward. They just gotta fix some things. And hopefully just not rehash that original trilogy. And I don't know, though, if we're going to get Matrix 5, because I think Sing 2 beat out Matrix in the box office. Now, granted, I know it's on HBO Max. I don't know how it did on HBO Max. Just saying. This movie was not as bad as people were saying. and I would see a sequel, even though I didn't like the film that much. So, Matrix Resurrections. Let me know what you guys thought of it. You've seen it. I'm curious to hear. And thank you so much for watching. Click here to see more of Dave's Takes.